Welcome to our session. Thank you, Dan, so much. Dan and I have done this presentation a few times, and it's changed so much over, say, the past 3 years, and that's a good thing. Some of the things that he talked with you about was the factors influencing border delays, which we all know that there's a huge concern, mainly among businesses and actually on personal travel trips, that we want to, they're anxious about the border. And, business is all about moving things fast, safely, and reliably. So like Dan had mentioned, if a business cannot, or if a customer cannot depend on that delivery date of December 24th, they're in a lot of trouble. So moving things fast, safe, and reliably is really the key. In order to do that, we have to have the infrastructure in place, an efficient infrastructure, inspection processes. As we've all been, has there been anyone not going across the border? Isn't anyone not experienced going across the border? Okay, very good.
Or has everybody experienced going across the border?
And delays.
Well, then when I say one of the things I do at Michigan State is direct the Canadian Studies Center, everyone tells me about their border experience. I've heard it all. That's something for cocktail hour, right? But it can be pretty intimidating. Even when they take their time with you, the Border Patrol takes their time with you. How are you? Where do you work? Really, that's interesting. Tell me more. It makes you a little bit nervous. You just don't know where it's all going. But border staffing has been a major issue, and there's been some commitment to increasing staffing at the border. That's been a big change that we've seen. Jobs, right? Driver preparedness. Obviously, if the folks like Schneider, no relation, unfortunately, prepare their drivers well, then they don't cause that delay. They have the right papers. They know what's allowed and what's not allowed. Maybe they've already gotten what we'll talk about as preclearance. So there are a number of things they can do to better prepare drivers. And I think they've done a fairly good job of doing that on a personal travel basis. Yes, you have to have your passport. And if you didn't get that message, you'll remember it very well next time, because they are not going to let you cross that border without that passport, and you'll be turning around. So I've heard that story several times, and it never happens twice to the same person. So, and then access to the plaza and the primary inspection booths. Obviously, how they funnel traffic into those border inspection booths is really critically important. So, oops, sorry. So the key thing that I want to cover is the policy proposals in progress, obviously. And I think there's been so much change since 2001. It's a marker for everyone. 9/11 is a big marker for everyone. But it took until 2011 in order for two governments between U.S. and Canada to get together a real agreement on how they wanted to approach the border and things that they could do differently. And a big part of that is because they very much wanted stakeholder input. So just meetings everywhere, conversations everywhere about how to do this better, how to move things more securely was the number one at that time. And then, of course, how to move things faster and more reliable. So that plan came together in 2011, February 2011, and President Obama and Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced two initiatives, actually. They acknowledged the connections between the U.S. and Canada. They saw that since this problems at the border had not been addressed, that it was important to do so because of jobs in the economy, if anything else. and also just the sense of being safe, feeling for citizens to feel safe. So they got together and they started these two initiatives. One is the Beyond the Border Plan, and the other is the Regulatory Council. So what I'd like to do is talk you through those a little bit. I think everyone here has probably heard of Beyond the Border and maybe the Regulatory Cooperation Council. These two initiatives build on the bilateral cooperation of trade, investment, emergency preparedness, as I mentioned, security, and also defense. So both of them are, I mentioned there were a number of stakeholder meetings. Transparency is the bottom line. They really want this to be transparent. It's questionable on some of that because you're asking two sovereign nations to exchange information, maybe to reveal some of the things that might have been, or really are, top secret to their individual countries. So the sharing of information between U.S. and Canada is really remarkable, I think, at this point in time. There have been sort of a growing of trust between the two, and it's been steadily increasing. So let me trade here. Some of the agreements that come out of that plan, the real themes of it, are that they address threats early. So in order to address threats early, they need to look at where are the threats, who are the threats, why are there threats, and share that information on both borders. Obviously, trade facilitation, economic growth, and jobs, major priority, probably one of the first. But all of those threats are not only threats to personal safety, but also to business and the economy. So the earlier they can attack those, the better for economic growth and jobs. Cross-border law enforcement, to have that collaboration continues to be a priority, a work in progress, and critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. So critical infrastructure has a whole lot to do with the bridge, but it also has to do with, Dan talked about the technology. We have the technology to do things very, very well, but we need to put it out there and do a few pilots and keep moving forward. We need to build a trusting relationship with our technology. Some of the things that fall under these themes, you're going to see some real common words or phrases: information sharing, how we can do things jointly, joint assessments is highlighted here. Common approaches, build those common approaches, help each other understand why we handle things the way we do, and maybe learn the best way to do it, best practices out of that sharing of information. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can see that there are very definitely some common themes. Stopping threats, preventing threats, making sure things are screened. So the more they can screen things before people reach that booth, the better. And that's been a major initiative over the last 3 or 4 years. The word trust comes up quite a few times. Trusted traveler, trusted cargo, trusted business, trusted importers. Infrastructure and technology, we had mentioned that. Cooperation, cooperative investigations. And when you think about some of the incidences that have happened, you'll see that there is growing collaboration on sharing of information. I don't know if, I get the cross-border protection emails, alerts, and I just thought I'd try that out for a while to see what kinds of alerts I received. And it's all, most of it, the majority, I would say 95% of it is they're announcing that they caught a drug mule or some kind of drug exchange at the border. So that continues to be a big issue. But what they're looking at is, given that they're cooperating, what they saw in the past was there were so many repeat offenders, and they're seeing that recidivism is going down. So the repeated offenders are not, they're learning their lesson, or they're not returning. They're figuring out different ways, unfortunately, but they're also we're also figuring out those different ways too. So recidivism is really, really down. Rapid response is another, obviously. Again, we see these joint statements of privacy principles. They have annual meetings, and every year they present a report on all of the progress that's been made with both the Beyond the Border Plan and the Regulatory Cooperation Council. So now they really wanted to align these regulatory approaches, and that's where we get more into the Regulatory Cooperation Council, because that's what they heard from people who were doing business across the borders. These are the things that they were most concerned about. Their drivers' health and safety. You know, what kind of environment is there for the drivers? Is it an intimidating environment? You know, how can we grow and invest in exports and imports if our drivers are running into so much trouble? So I pretty much go through, and we have no time to go through the different points of progress, but these presentations will be posted to our website, so you'll have them available to you. And then again, there are some real themes here as we go through 2012, 2013. Harmonization. I think harmonization is one of the words that they've banned for the year 2015 because it's come up so much in our reports. You know, how can we harmonize? But it's paying off. We have a long way to go, no doubt. But pre-inspection, pre-clearance for not only businesses, importers and exporters, but also for travelers by car and by train across the border. We see a real growth in the Nexus program. Raise your hand if you're a Nexus person. There's two. Good deal. That is the subscription to Nexus is really rising. So, and I think, you know, it's really important to acknowledge that the Beyond the Border Plan, you know, so many times you kick in one thing and it receives so much criticism that people come up with something new. There's been a real commitment to the Beyond the Border Plan. And part of that is because of that annual report. People know they can become informed. They know what's going on, and their information is, and their feedback is included in that. So you're seeing this slide really just says that the business community is looking at the action plan, the Regulatory Cooperation Council, RCC, and saying, yeah, we get it, and they're also making their demands, but they have a sense that they're being worked with, their problems are being addressed. You know, I think some of this depends on who you talk with. So it's really important to stick with the numbers. Dana talked about data, and I've seen so much data come out of the ETBC, the Eastern Transportation Border Coalition. We have Chris to thank for that. So it's available. It's really important to pay attention to that and keep an eye on it, and let the researchers look at that and figure out what the bottom line is, because that's the only way we can see progress, really benchmark it, and then see where the problems lie and attack those. So in the Joint Forward Plan, which is just sort of Beyond the Border 2.0 or 7.0 or whatever the case may be, it outlines 18 different agencies or efforts between Canada and the U.S. And for example, agriculture is a huge area, as you can imagine, with our big concern about food systems innovation, food safety, food security, and plant, animal, human health is one big cycle. So that's a major area of mutual agreement that we need to tackle that and make that a priority. And if you look at here are all the work areas that have laid out. So there's virtually, I don't know who would look at this plan and not see a call to action or something they could not, something that wouldn't matter to them. So it's quite extensive. So you look at the work areas, you see food or crop, obviously transportation, cars, autos, energy's mentioned, and also medical devices. And then you look at the top trading commodities, and you can see that they sort of link up. So the top trading commodities are very definitely the top priority of this plan. Then finally, I want to mention that you also see a growing number of groups specific to the Great Lakes region and the Midwest, and how they're trying to funnel information to the general public, because the general public votes for or against they could vote for or against a bridge, for or against new technologies, for or against things like Nexus, and the list goes on. But also to communicate better with policymakers, because you have term limits in a number of your states in the Midwest, and Michigan is among the more stringent. We have new legislators cycling through, really a full board of legislators cycling through about every 6 years. And these legislators are citizen legislators. That's what term limits was intended to do. And citizen legislators means that they come from all walks of life. They come in as teachers, and they're concerned about education. They come in as policemen, they're concerned about safety. They come in as small business. We have a number of small business owners in our legislature. They're printers, they're photographers. They want to look at taxes and regulation, that kind of commerce, that kind of thing. And then we have the emergency room doctor, who's very, very concerned about health policy. So anybody out there thinking about trade? Anybody out there thinking about border security or the U.S.-Canada connection? No, they're thinking about the voters in their region, in their county, in their district. And that's what we have to deal with. So Dan and I will give this presentation time and time and time again, and we hope that you can play a big part in getting the information out there, making people more aware of the importance of the Canada-U.S. connection, and it really matters to everyone. It matters to everyone in U.S. and Canada, really globally. So some of these efforts that are coming about, the Eastern Border Transportation Coalition has been around for a number of years. The Great Lakes International Trade and Transport Hub Initiative is rather new. It's about 3 years. Is it 3 years? 4. 4 years, see? The Council of Great Lakes Region is another group that has been developed out of Mowat Center, out of Ottawa. And then the Canada-U.S. Business Association is another opportunity, and I know a number of you are part of that. David, I saw where you're a member. The Council of Great Lakes Governors. Now that council, it wasn't called that, but Great Lakes Governors has been around for a long time, and there's been some level of connection expected, some level of collaboration expected, because we have the Great Lakes to steward, correct? But there's this resurgence of that group, and it includes, and the name is very unfortunate, and even our governor here in Michigan, Governor Snyder, has said, don't like the name because it's Council of Great Lakes Governors, when in fact it includes provincial leaders in Canada in a big way. I mean, there's not, it's totally inclusive of the two nations. And so they have stated priorities. If you get on any of these folks' website, but particularly with the Council of Great Lakes Governors, they're very clear about what their priorities are and what we're striving for in this region. The Canadian-U.S. Business Law Institute is out of Ohio, and they're very active on a number of things. Energy is a big push for them. And then, of course, Midwest Association of Canadian Studies in the U.S. and the Association of Canadian Studies, the American Association of Canadian Studies in the U.S. continue on. So the big piece here is find a place in these groups to really give your input, really advance learn about the priorities and advance those that are important to you and most important to you in your life and your work. and use the all of the information sources available to you. It's one thing I'm going to close on that, but you know, it doesn't take much. You don't have to reach far to get information update on what's happening with Beyond the Border. You know, it's not, and it's an important thing to do. It's an important thing to know about. So keep informed, participate in public discussions, increase awareness of actions related to Beyond the Border, and ask lots of questions to Dan. Dr. Lynch.
Are some of these policies looking, like in border improvements, are they looking to do it across the whole extent of the border rather than just some of the key points? Because there were like 10 border crossings or something like that?
Yes, and the answer is yes, they are. So, and some, you know, you can, the conversation is that you can not look at any one border crossing the same. Okay, so what we're doing here, the trade between Detroit and Windsor and that border crossing may be very different, and it in fact is very different from Sault Ste. Marie and Sault Ste. Marie. Have any of you been to Sault Ste. Marie border crossing? Would you say it's a little different? Very different. It's
cars moving across there.
yeah, well, yeah. There's a culture, a regional culture that hits these border crossings. So our crossing, the crossings here in Michigan, 3 of the busiest land crossings in the world, are very different than the crossing out in Vancouver and Prince Rupert. Vastly different in the kinds of products that we trade back and forth across the border. Really, why people move back and forth across the borders very differently. And so, while they look at them individually, I think you'll agree that a lot of these things, based on the priorities of the Beyond the Border plan, would be suitable for any border. In fact, later on, we had a session that says this border between the U.S. and Canada is a model for the rest of the world. Mm-hmm.
Just quickly, there are 119 border crossings between the U.S. and Canada, so it's a significant number. But secondly, I think where we tie things together with what Dan was saying, what you were saying, is despite all these initiatives and these programs, what we're actually seeing is increase in border delays. A recent report by NITEC, which is the Niagara Technology Coalition, that monitors traffic and borders, I found that between 2010 and 2013, or 11 and 13, the traffic delays have been growing by about 1 to 2% per year. When you take that 1% per year, you're looking at the major crossings, the Peace Bridge crossing there, and the Queenston Lewiston and the Rainbow Bridge. It's millions of dollars every year. So while we have all these programs, it's mostly focusing on security, not on trade mobility.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Time is money. Exactly. So, and security will always, well, security tends to trump trade.
Trade, yeah,
That's
unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Although I can go to Europe and travel through 32 different countries without being checked.
I have a couple of questions for you. Some recent articles that I've read about IT are that we have failed to study the gaps in data. In other words, no one's published a list of what we don't have or what we still need. And so there's a whole body out there about gaps in data. Have you heard anything about that in all of your travels and discussions? And if so, do you think that's something that we should be studying?
Well, I think we've struggled to get the data enough to know that you have private business who know the numbers better than anyone else, but it's the private sector. And so to share that information could reveal some of their business practices that they don't really care to reveal. But that seems to be opening up in some circumstances.
Canada is reducing its data collection.
What's that?
Canada's reducing.
I was just gonna say,
Yes.
a couple of issues is, one of the conferences I was, talked into being vice president of Canadian Transportation Research Forum, and Canada Stats got up and said, people were complaining about exactly that, especially the consultants and the businesses. There's just, the data isn't good enough, there's a lot missing, and it's old. And the person from Canada Stats got up and said, that's not a problem anymore. And they're like, really? Oh, you're gonna fix it? And they said, yeah, we don't have the funding to collect the data anymore, so we're not even gonna publish it. So yeah, you're right on target. Or the formats are different, you know? Kilometers, miles even, you know? 6.2, I gotta divide. So it is a huge problem.
I looked at the list, Anne Marie, of the various associations, and I think there were 6 or 7. There's one that I came to know called the Trans-Border Working Group of
It's very good.
basically an association of Canadian province transportation officials and U.S. DOT officials from the West Coast to the East Coast. Has there been any more interaction with them? It seems like they're very similar to the Eastern Border Trading Coalition.
Mhm, mhm. I see them as a little bit broader than the EBTC, but Chris is gone. They work
Good, we can say
together.
anything.
Now, I do think there's some collaboration there, but that's an excellent group. I check in with that group quite often for information. I think they're very motivated. In fact, our director of transportation here in the state of Michigan for a while was the president of that association. So I think they're coming up with the same struggles as everyone else regarding data collection, but they have priorities listed out on their website, and some of the obviously the same things that we've talked about here today.
Yeah, since this isn't public, I was talking to a transportation Canadian official, remain unnamed, talking about harmonization, and their comment was, harmonization is not capitulation. So, what they're trying to do in public versus what difficulties in private, everybody's trying to work towards the same common goal, but in different ways, and sometimes it's working. And a lot of times I think it's not, to Chris's point, delays are up. It's not helping our role as North America in a global economy.
Insofar as all these associations, how much collaboration goes on between them? I mean, there's 6, 7 of them. It seems like there's a lot of duplication, and it seems like more could be accomplished if everyone chose a niche.
Mm-hmm.
And has there been any discussion among all those groups?
Well, from my perspective, I think duplication is not a bad thing. I think redundancy on websites and priorities and projects and even the information that we post is not a bad thing. But I will agree that there could be more collaboration. But I don't think it's because people do not want to collaborate. I think there's a whole lot to do. And I know with Glyph, it's, as they say, one small corner of the desk, among, 5 different kinds of tasks. So it's basically a volunteer kind of organization. Some of these groups are gaining in membership and working very hard to attract membership, so they have some base funding to do some real research and some more proactive things. But your point's well taken. I think there could definitely be more cooperation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is like meetings like this, people don't know about the other groups, and then you learn about another group that you can kind of start working with. Like when we started Glyph, we had a number of organizations that actually took a run at us and said, you can't do this. It's like, we could do whatever we want, why can't we do it? And they said, well, because we're already doing it. Okay, well, let's do it together, so I agree with you. But to me, the more the merrier, because one of the big problems about Canada-US relations is education. People are unaware. They're always thinking about, like statistics, okay? oh my God, the growth with Asia, with China is growing 300%. Okay, great, but you know, like 10% is still 10%. And when you've got these two huge countries doing a tremendous amount of trade, it's not the percentage increase, which is also very good, but it's actually the volume of trade that we do. So,
Okay, one last question for me, and I don't mean to cut anybody off, but if you had one thing that you could change to make the border crossing and trade more, as I like to say, cheaper, better, faster, what would that be?
I know, mine would be.
go ahead, you go. Mine would be too.
I keep having to go first.
I know, ladies first.
Okay, you two, somebody
I
go
would
first.
like for people, travelers, tourists, and as well as business, freight forwarders and so forth, I would like for them to be able to get safety clearance before they ever get even close to the border. So I think we really need to push on preclearance measures and inconsistency. Okay, I added one thing. Consistency on both sides. And actually, at some point in time, I mean, Mexico's going to play into this at some point because we're in it together.
And mine is very similar. It's sort of clear once and cross twice. Why, when I go through Toronto, do I have to leave security that I've already just gone through in America or in Canada and then go through the other country's security again? I mean, that's crazy. And why, when I cross the bridge, do I have to be questioned twice? You know, it's like, couldn't we trust each other?
I think we're being ushered out. Anyone have a burning question? If not,
We'll be around.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.